My name is Don Price from Atlassian, and I'm Atlassian's word futurist. But at Experts Unleashed, I want to do something different with you. I want to bring experts from their field to you. Experts that aren't going to talk about thought leadership or theory, but they're going to bring their lived experience, their pragmatic insights, and their stories to help you unleash your potential. So the format of this show is incredibly simple. It's all based on three things. Every single session we do with an expert and Experts Unleashed, we're going to have three chapters, three core things that they are famous for, where we go through the theory, we go through the practice, and we get them to share one insight that you can try. So listen in for the three chapters. Folks, welcome to another episode of Experts Unleashed, the show where we bring experts in their field to you, to our audience. Why? For years, I've been sort of getting frustrated by generic thought leadership that doesn't actually tell you what to do or how to do it. So instead, we're bringing people with lived experience. Today, someone with huge amounts of research and people that are actually implementing that research to drive change. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which I meet with you on today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'm based in Sydney, and I want to pay my respects to elders past and present. Our guest today is an absolute phenomenal human being. I've known Dr Jemma King for a while. Every time I've sat in many of Dr Jemma's sort of lectures and talks, and I've had conversations with her on the side. My brain just kind of gets kerfuddled and a bit messed up. And I'm like, I learned something. I don't know quite what I learned, but I can be a better human being. I could give Jemma a long intro, and I was going to. I actually had a plan where I was like, Dr. Jemma King has a PhD in human behavior, emotional intelligence, performance under stress expert. I was going to do this long intro, and then Jemma sent through a document. So we do a thing called My User Manual in Atlassian, right? If you buy a TV, it comes with a user manual. You hire a human, no bloody user manual. So we don't know how to work with them. I gave Jemma our user manual, and the first section that Jemma answered was you. And as I was reading through it, Jemma, I don't know if you did this on purpose. I noticed there was kind of two sections to your you answer. There's you, the person, and then you, the career. So just for our audience's benefit, instead of me introducing you, because I do a good job, but you're going to do a better job, I was fascinated by the section on like you as a person, like your background, your history, and then you as a leader, what you do and work right now. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome Jemma. Jemma, who are you and what do you do?
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Yeah, I've always enjoyed when we meet up. So such a pleasure to be on this program. So yeah, I mean, I've had a really sort of convoluted and very unusual background, as you can see from the document. I sent very accidental academic. So right now I'm a research fellow at the University of Queensland doing lots of psychophysiological research. So looking at how the brain and the body interact, and then how does that translate into how you turn up at work, at home, and then more generally, in existentially in your life. But and I think that the very bizarre background that I came from has really helped me have this deep, deep fascination for human behavior and why do people do the things they do? Why are we so illogical? What are some of the patterns? So just for the listeners, my dad was a hotelier, and his background, he's like from First Fleet stock, so people that came in 1788 on the Cirrus, so really old Australian, white Australian, of course, and they were dairy farmers and lived, in the country. So there's a bit of a, country larrikinism that was, came through our family.
Yes, a bit of mischief in there, Jemma. I don't mind admitting there's a little bit of mischief in there.
Yeah. Laugh at yourself. Don't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
And then so we went into hotels. So we moved every 3 years, and that was excruciating in some ways, but also, being the new kid all the time, but also really fascinating. So I lived in a hotel room, and so we were exposed to such different walks of life, from rock stars to politicians to average people, and we spent breakfast, lunch, and dinner we would eat in a hotel restaurant, and so it was a really weird upbringing. And then when I did a bit of university, and then I ended up thinking, I just need to get out of Australia. I just need to go and see the world. So then I ended up buying the cheapest Aeroflot ticket I could find to Italy, because I wanted to go to Italy, had a 2-day stopover in Moscow, and then ended up living in Moscow for nearly 2 years. So this is
standard. As
Yeah,
you do. Yeah. 2-day stopover, 2-year
yeah.
stopover.
And I have no Russian blood whatsoever. Like pure Aussie chick, went over there, didn't speak the language. No one really spoke English back then. And then
Mm.
I, went to the local Irish pub as all four of us
Yeah.
do.
That's a path well trodden.
Yes, yes, that is. And then I was just talking about my life, and they were like, "Oh, this is a Russian-Irish joint venture," and they were looking for people who knew about hospitality. And I said, "I know about hospitality." So then they said, "Do you want to run this nightclub?" And I went. First of all, it started off as I helped set up a Chinese restaurant, and then I helped set up and run a nightclub in Moscow, which was pretty crazy. It was dangerous and very eye-opening. It was kind of like the Wild West back then, and lots of mafia, lots of
Yeah.
violence, and
Probably some quite strong personality. And it's fascinating. I never realized this was going to happen. I don't know if this is on purpose or by accident, but every guest I've had so far has had a really rich tapestry of upbringing. There's not like a standard, X then Y then Z. And so, like, I think people would assume, like, when they hear about your field, your expertise, and where you are today, it'd be easy to second guess what upbringing you had, and it's actually the opposite, right? And I think there's something beautiful in that, where it's like all those experiences have helped you form who you are today, but they're kind of an orthogonal set of opportunities that either you stumbled across or you went after, but they weren't a common sort of linear path.
Absolutely not, and really not academic. I was a terrible student. I was really naughty. But then I became one of those, mature age students that sat up the front and took notes and was, annoyed the lecturer. But yeah, so it was a very convoluted and a different upbringing. And I think it's important, to have seen different facets of life and to and just see the worst and the best of people, particularly in those environments.
Yeah, I love it, and I think it was a great reminder for me. Like, I've been using my user manual for years, so I already feel like I'm betrothed to it in some kind of value exchange. But it was fascinating reading yours. Like, I've met you a few times, but never asked those questions. And I'm reading that, going, I've met you a few times, and I still didn't know that about your background. Now I know that. I feel like it can change the way you actually sort of interact with someone. So I encourage anyone externally. My user manual, we'll put the link in. It's a free asset, but to do that with other leaders, it's a very powerful tool. Jemma, just one of the things I absolutely adore about you is you take what I think are really complex, very scientific based things, and you explain them in a way a layman like me can understand. So for our audience, like, when you're a PhD, you're a doctor, you're in behavioral science, what is it you actually do?
Well, I think I'm good at that because I was a terrible student, and I
kind of makes sense. Like, you had to explain it in plain English because you had to understand it in plain English.
Yeah, I was always looking for shortcuts when I was at uni because there's always so much other more fun things to do. And so when I was tutoring, I really understood that. Okay, what's the minimum amount of work you can do to get the maximum amount of information inside your skull? And that's telling stories. So I think humans are not moved by data or facts. They're really moved by, or they remember, gossipy stories. And so I love to contextualize this often complex science into things that people can resonate with, and stories and historical facts. I do, ground a lot of it in evolutionary psychology.
Yeah.
And then just make it relatable to, like, why is this important to you? Why should you care about listening to me? So what I do on every day is very different. I've got no structure or routine. Again, I'd hate to have a job where I just woke up and did the same thing every day.
No.
So a lot of it is I do research. So I've got PhD students that I supervise, and we're doing lots of really cool research in psychophysiology. We use the biometric capture devices, the Whoop, and we look at all the factors: stress, sleep, emotional intelligence, gut biome, even blood glucose, how that impacts your cognitive ability, your ability to have effective teams, psychological safety. So basically, it's like all my research is how to minimize stress or utilize stress in a way that is advantageous for people who are in high stress, no fail, high attention to detail environments. And so then I bring my research into my consulting practice. So then I go into organizations and into, like, sporting environments.
Yeah.
And then I teach people the lessons I've learned from really high achievers like the special forces, Olympic athletes, and I sort of deconstruct, distill down, and try and translate this information to people like, leaders and knowledge workers in organizations, because it's all the same stuff. Like, we've all got the same physiology, whether or not you're in a boardroom, on the blocks, or, in the battlefield.
The principles are the same. The environment might be different, but the principles are largely similar. So if anyone was curious, they're no longer curious. You know why I've invited Jemma on the show is because the thing that you just explained, I think, is like paramount for the world of any leader. And when I say leader, I don't mean like leadership by position. Like, anyone leading a project or a team or initiative or an organization is struggling with what you just explained right now. I feel for years we've been talking about high performance. We've been talking about psychological safety. I don't think we've necessarily been taking the actions to improve, right, and create it, which is what I want to focus on today. Jemma, you shared with us, we're going to focus on optimizing leadership and knowledge worker performance. When I saw that headline, I was like, yes, please. Now, a caveat for our audience: there's every chance this will descend into a personal coaching session and therapy session for me when Jemma explains it, because as I went through the 3 chapters that we agreed for you, I'm like, I need that. I don't know if our audience need it, but personally, this feels a bit selfish. I need it. The 3 chapters that we're going to talk about, you've mentioned the word a few times. I still don't know what it means, so hopefully you'll demystify that for us. Psychophysiology. So we're going to tap into that chapter 1. Chapter 2, stress. Brilliant. I think we all experience stress in different forms, and you just said something before that really got me, like how we can channel that, not how we dismiss it or mask it, but how we channel it for good. And the third one, as a married man and a dad of 2 twin boys, sleep. Something that sometimes feels mystical to me, but I know you talk a lot about the impact of sleep and the relevance of that in high performance, which I think we've got a bit smarter on in the last few years, but I think a lot of people see them as detached. So let's start with psychophysiology. What is it, and why should we care?
Yeah, so it's the combination of psychology and physiology. And I think traditionally these 2 fields have been very disparate. Like, the physiologists were over there and never did the training, did they meet the psychologists? And it was very territorial. And then, with my work at the Special Forces, then working with the Olympic swim team and at the AIS, I'm like, we need a much more holistic perspective. Like, you can't completely ignore the body and then work on the mind, and then work on the mind and ignore the body. And so I was really interested in looking at cortisol and immune function and stress hormones and all those biological factors. And then what does that do to your brain? And then how do your thoughts create chemicals, and those chemicals, how do they impact your performance? When you're winning or losing by 100th of a second, say in the Olympics, every little bit of energy, every molecule counts. And so
you're talking about like very fine margin. And we're all in some kind of fine margin, but that's like hyper fine margin where a small difference goes a long way.
Yes, yeah. And I think that people didn't understand that what you're thinking about in the lead up to, a peak event or a big meeting, or anytime you have to negotiate or show up, what you're thinking about and what you're cogitating or ruminating on before will actually have significant effects on how you see the world, how you're perceived, the speed of processing, like in your chemo signaling, what kind of like chemo signals are you giving off? We're very, very attuned to people's chemo signaling, and it's an emotional contagion. So I'm always like, if you have to show up, you have to prepare, protect your emotional and physiological state. And so I do a lot of education on how you do that and what that looks like practically. I'm a very strong proponent of giving very practical hacks. And so that's where my whole field of research comes in, is just understanding, the nexus between them, and it has significant repercussions. And so, and that leads into stress and sleep. So, my PhD was looking at a preemptive approach to stress for the Special Forces, using emotional intelligence constructs. So how to, perceive emotions, yourself and others, how to understand what's going on, why these emotions are appearing. Then how do you use that emotional information to make decisions or influence others? And then the most important one was, how do you manage your own emotions, up-regulate or down-regulate your own emotions according to the context? And how do you do that for those around you, your team members, your family, your boss, your subordinates? And so I think this preemptive approach is really important, where you try and get all of this information and this toolbox set up and practice it and sort of stress inoculate yourself before you get into these stressful situations. So you've kind of tested yourself, you know how you act under pressure, you know your stress style, you know how you typically act when you get stressed and how to typically get out of that. And then, I was doing so much research in this whole space on stress. And then I myself hate sleeping. I find it incredibly boring and such a waste of time. There's so many awesome things you can be doing. But then, as I was looking at all the research and it just became so apparent that sleep is the foundational pillar of mental health, wellness. And there's not a part of your brain and body that isn't affected by sleep deprivation. And so I then became really interested in sleep, and I'd be like, I'd love to take a pill and get it done, but I just realized that so much mental health disruption is probably undiagnosed sleep deprivation or ignored sleep deprivation, because it makes you crazy. We
Yeah.
use sleep deprivation as a torture for, a good
Yeah,
reason.
yeah, there's a rationale. Yeah, yeah. It's been used as a
Yeah.
weapon for years.
And as you know well, because you've got two little
That's
cheeky
it.
monkeys.
That's it.
That
So if we go
my
back onto that, this kind of the brain, the body thing, right? If you're a
Mhm.
leader out there right now, what you just said makes sense. How would I, as a leader, start to look at signals that maybe I'm out of kilter, or what are the
Mhm.
things I should be looking for?
Yeah, really awesome question. I think the first thing leaders need to know is that if you can't manage yourself, you can't manage others, and you can't be expected to manage an organization.
Yeah.
Like if
Mate,
you
we
turn up,
should just underline that. Just make that a headline, because I think that, just as a self-awareness point, like, if you can't look after yourself, you can't look after others. Like, it's a low base, it's a low bar, but it's kind of a reality, right?
yeah, and I think that I work on lots of leadership programs, and
Mm.
so much of this leadership content is this higher order consciousness. Like, there's the 5 points of strategy, here's the blah blah blah, like kind of like really theoretical constructs. And I'm like, what happens when you're under pressure and then that heat comes and or you make a mistake, your brain just flips out and you get this amygdala hijack, you get this mental blanking, and you literally cannot remember any of those higher order constructs.
Yeah.
Or if you come into work and you're tired, hungover, disheveled, or not dealing with your diet, your exercise, and your relationships at home, you cannot be effective. And
Yeah.
so it's like concentric circles. I say, start at the micro, at the body level. And that's basically, I have a formulaic approach to leadership and mental health in leadership. And we know that at any one time, you can't have all the factors on green. So it's like levers.
Yeah.
So my formulaic approach is, number one, foundational pillar, make sure you're sleeping. And if you can't get lots of sleep, at least get consistent sleep times. So if you go to bed at 2 one night, 8 one night, 10 one night, 1 one night, your body gets completely confused. You're better off going to bed late the same time every night, because there's so many cellular functions in your body that need to know what time it is, and they need to get ready. So down regulating the stress hormones and up regulating the melatonin, and that's a lot to do. It's kind of like if you were running a business, so a cafe, and you said to your employees, we're opening on Tuesday, I want you to work. And they're like, okay, what time should we turn up to work? They're like, I don't know, I'll let you know when I open the doors, right?
Yeah.
You can't do that. So every
Yeah,
cell in your
great
body.
analogy. In any other form, consistency wins. And then with the body, we're like, I'll sleep whenever I can. But actually, having something regular and pattern means that the other things that have to happen, the knock-on steps, know when that's going to happen.
Yeah, and then you'll be able to get into deep slow wave sleep much faster, much more effectively, and the quality of your sleep is just much better. And so I think sleep consistency is
Yeah.
crucial. And in fact, we worked on a big study with the Arctic Army Warfare Group up in Alaska, and
Right.
looking at sleep consistency. And this our research found that those who had more consistent sleep times had lower homesickness and more resilience. So
Wow.
if you can't do anything, at least be consistent.
Be
So
consistent.
that's one thing. I'm really big proponent on gut biome, and there's a strong correlation between the health of your gut biome and a whole range of mental health outcomes. Even motivation, sleep is affected by your gut biome, perceptions, lots and lots of disorders, I think, stem from your gut biome. So really look after that. That's, having 40 different types of plant matter a week, which sounds like a lot. Just chuck in a couple of curries. And so
it's all right. Gemma, my new wife, my only wife, recently married, is a nutritionist. And so my education on gut biome has gone from nothing to a lot in the last few years. And for me, someone who actually suffered with bowel cancer and has had my colon removed, I was having terrible trouble with my digestive system. Since I started to focus on my gut biome health, everything changed. My sleep changed. My energy levels are more consistent. My happiness, and I'm like, it's like a magic wand, but it's because I couldn't see it. I wasn't working on it. So I think for a lot of people, it's in the background, right?
Yeah. But also, I really want to caveat everything I'm saying that, leadership's really hard, and there's so many competing priorities, and sometimes we just need to have a blowout. Sometimes we just need to go have fun. You'll have a big weekend, or you want to have a staff party, or you want to socially connect with people, which is incredibly important. So I'm all about the science on how you can have a big weekend, drink a lot, and then how you come back from that.
Yes.
And so I'm really big proponent on understand how your gut biome works. So if you do have a big weekend or have a big boozy client dinner, whatever, what can you do to come back from that? And and I think that's really important, not to get stressed about, oh my God, I didn't go to the gym, and the neuroticism that you're finding in this whole wellness movement, can be quite stressful. Actually, the stress from that can be more detrimental than actually just going to the pub with your mates and having a drink.
That is a critical point. And I think right now with some of the noise in this space, it's almost like performance anxiety of, oh my God, it's 10 o'clock. I promised myself I'll be asleep at 10:05. I've only got 5 minutes. I've now got no chance of going to sleep versus just going with the flow. And like I say, accepting that the kids are going to wake up and you're going to have a late night here. And you have a rounded life, not have a predictable minute by minute planned life.
And this is exactly why, I say I do all the good things generally. So occasionally I can do the bad things. And this is really understanding that levers. So I think you've got, there's about 17 levers that I talk about, but generally it is, as I said, sleep, eating, gut biome, moving your body for emotional stability. So we've got all this amazing pharmacological factory inside our bones and our muscles. And when you move it, you're actually producing things like myokines and all sorts of osteocalcium, amazing hormones and proteins that are very anti-anxiety, antidepressant. And apart from just making, endorphins and making you feel good, actually, moving your lymphatic system very much changes your outlook on life. And we know that, even having strong core actually is very much correlated with cognitive perseverance. So doing things like Pilates will actually make you be able to work harder and longer through boring, annoying tasks. So strong correlation between physical strength and mental strength. So there's social connectivity. You really, really need to have that oxytocin, which is the love hormone from laughing or hanging out with your friends. And oxytocin is a wonderful cortisol antidote. So if you are feeling stressed out, try and get some oxytocin into your system. Pat a dog, have a laugh, cuddle a baby, even look at cute baby videos.
Honestly, whenever I work from home a lot. Whenever I start to feel myself getting wound up, I just go to the kids level. If I go on the ground with the kids and the stupid curiosity they've got for the world and how they play with stuff, all those stresses feel like they're instantly gone. They're still kind of there in the background, but it just gives me a new perspective on the world.
It's oxytocin. And actually there's this new research saying that children get the most amount of oxytocin from their dads when their dads are rumbling with them.
We do kind of roughly we do wrestling. So we do it before bedtime, which was fascinating because early on we're like, are we stimulating them before bedtime? And this is bad. It's no, we're taking that last bit of energy out of them, but the rough and tumble in the play, and they giggle like all madness. Yeah, and then it's like so bed, and they are out, right? Because they've just used all that energy.
Yeah. Interestingly, though, do you know that men's testosterone levels drop when they have children? Have you felt this or experienced it?
Tell me
It is
more.
evolutionary. Yeah.
What
So,
happens?
well, I think that what it does, it actually makes them more nurturing when a male has or their partner has a baby, because testosterone is the more decisive, aggressive, more like
Right.
out there fighting against the world. So your levels actually do drop. So then you're more interested in this kind of nurturing, caregiving
That makes
role.
sense.
It's temporary, but yeah,
Right.
it's a lot of guys will feel it, and some guys, the drop is so much they actually feel quite depressed.
So one thing that definitely changed after the kids came along, right? I think my hearing's normal. It's not brilliant or awful. Like, I've just got normal 46-year-old man hearing. My hearing got
Yeah,
exponentially better for like the 6 months after they were born. I could hear a
yeah,
rat fart 400 meters down the road, and I'm
yeah,
like threat detected. So I became this kind of security guard for our house to
yeah,
create the safety for the kids, which was highly irrational. I live in a very nice neighborhood in Sydney. Like nothing
yeah,
bad was going to happen, but my reptilian brain was kind of going, no, you've got
yeah,
these things to look after now. You must protect.
yeah, absolutely. And females have a really heightened sense of smell actually when they're pregnant and give birth.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because I do all the cooking
mm,
in the house. So yeah, Becca could literally smell everything.
yeah,
So if we've got these senses that, I mean, the ones you just shared are amazing, right? Around understanding our environment, gut biome, the things that stress us,
yeah.
right?
Social
Exercise.
engagement,
Yeah.
intellectual curiosity. Like you definitely need to be always learning something, and that this gives you this higher order
Ooh.
purpose. So I think
Yeah.
it's incredibly important to have this. And then also, I think like when you do get stressed and overwhelmed, one of my favorite tricks, as particularly if you're a leader or if you're in any situation, if you're like this sucks right now, you think to yourself, okay, get the teacher's mindset. What would I teach someone more vulnerable or lesser or younger than me? And that just flips you out because what it does, it tricks your brain into thinking that you've actually got more resources than you do. Because if you're teaching someone, it automatically elevates you out of a vulnerable victim mentality into like a higher, I'm a teacher. And that's one of the best ways to get out of a stressful
It's
situation
more
in your life.
virtuous as well, right? Yeah, I need to help someone else. Like it's an important thing to help the other
Yeah.
person, but it actually enables you to help yourself first.
Yeah. And honestly, that's the
I've been doing a
one
lot
like
of coaching and mentoring, and it's fascinating
yeah,
the amount of time I'm coaching or mentoring someone, and I'm like, I need to do that myself, and it almost
yeah.
takes the learned helplessness and gets rid of it and changes it into action.
It's super powerful. And you just sort of touched on this. Service to others is the greatest endeavor that you can have for your own mental health. I think that we've got this sort of super indulgent, introspective
Yeah,
culture where we're like me, my, like always thinking about how you're feeling. It makes you sad.
yeah,
Like the more we
it's too much. It's too much inward looking and too much comparison. So
yeah.
inward looking and then comparing to this false horizon that's never going to occur, and all you see is
Mm.
the gap.
Oh, the gap is where the pain is.
Oh,
Absolutely. The expectation gap is literally where insanity lives.
oh,
And so the antidote for this is when you're stressed, you find someone more stressed than you and help them. And it is like a
yeah.
panacea. It's bizarre, but like if you don't care about other people, it will help you.
So, Gemma, I want to go on to chapter 2 on stress and dive deeper into that. Before I do, there was a line you put when we were emailing backwards and forwards. There was a line that you put on your document that I read, and it's really, really got me. And I'd love you to I'm going to share it with the audience, but just so you can unpack it for us. Um, it says the quality of your life is predicted on the quality of your thoughts. So at that point, I'm like, I'm with you. Heard that before. Makes sense. If I'm thinking good things will happen, right? My wife talks about manifestation all the time, right? Let's if we think positive things will happen. Lovely, right? Then in brackets, you wrote something that really got me. Honestly, it's like a dagger, and I absolutely adore it. It says your sanity is inversely proportionate to the number of people you have issues with, not the other way around. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I think it's a real like if you look around anyone who has sort of mental health disruption, personality disorder, invariably they have a shit list of all the people they hate or they want to exact revenge on, right? And they think it's them. They think this person did this thing to me, therefore I'm warranted to want to like retaliate. But if
Yeah.
you think about it, like what's the common denominator? Them. Like happy, sane, stable people don't have grief, don't have beef with people. You just don't. You don't see the exterior world is dangerous and that you have to fight against. You actually, like, when you're healthy, happy, and sane, you actually can have empathy and compassion for people who are being assholes, right? You like, my mother always taught me this, like, walk in their shoes, take their perspective, what's happened to them in their childhood, what's their home life like. And when you just sort of like, abstract up and think, like, why is this person being an asshole? It's rarely about you. So therefore, the want to have problems with people and to have a revenge list tells you everything about you.
Yeah. It's a very strong mirror. It's a very strong mirror, isn't it?
And so I always think that, like, of course we like get pissed off and we're like, that person is just, but then you just go, all right, like, my life's pretty good. I'm pretty happy.
Yeah.
And as you know, like, having revenge or thinking nasty thoughts about another person, like Winston Churchill said, it's like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. And it is, and I'm very much about, like, I really understand the biochemical consequences of thoughts. And I know that when I produce cortisol, I'm lying in bed trying to go to sleep, there's no way cortisol lasts 30 minutes in your system. Its half-life's 30 minutes. So if you're lying in bed having hateful thoughts, like, that's really going to ruin your sleep. And half an hour later, you're like, I still haven't gone to sleep, and you've produced more cortisol.
Because you're angry that you didn't get to sleep. Yeah, you're in that vicious cycle.
Yeah, and so I've gotten to the stage in my life that I really can't stand the feeling of being, like, stressed and upset about stuff. So I push it out. I'll think about this at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I have, like, I tell myself I'll have a worry hour the next day. Obviously, sleep.
So it's not about, like, again, I mentioned before, it's not about masking the stress or pretending it's not there. It's like, no, I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to deal with it at 10 o'clock tomorrow, and here's the window of opportunity. So I'm going to acknowledge that the stress is there, but I'm not going to let it impact me now.
Yes, exactly. And what happens is, like, of course, when you during sleep, during the different parts of your sleep architecture, different things happening. So, like, in REM sleep, there's your emotional processing, making sense of the day, and you'll defrag your brain, and you'll actually, like, delete and file those emotions. You're like, and then in the morning you go, well, actually, that's not that bad. And you actually,
I remember you showing me this on a presentation once, and my mind kind of went, because it was just after the kids, I think, were born. So, like, my sleep wasn't great, and you were like,
I think I told you to sell them. Didn't I?
Yeah,
sell
you
them
did. And I tried Facebook Marketplace, but no one was buying them. But you showed a picture of a brain, like, before it went to sleep, with all this activity in it, and after successful sleep, of how it was basically cleansed, right? That defrag. It's cleansed, and you start the next day with a clean start. And then here's it with bad sleep, and all those things were still there. So you're starting the day almost in debt.
Yeah. And I think that's what happens. So good memory. I'm glad you listened in class. So there's adenosine, which is a metabolic byproduct of thinking. So you have, like, energy that it produced in your brain, adenosine triphosphate. It's a little explosion, and the byproduct of that is adenosine, and sort of builds up in your brain. And it's kind of like Mother Nature's dimmer switch, and tells you, okay, you've been thinking, walking, doing too much brain activity. It's time to, like, down regulate. And so the only way to get rid of this is through deep, slow wave sleep. It's kind of like gurney, so it just flushes out the cerebral spinal fluid, just flushes all the adenosine out. But the thing is that often we've got so many things in our environment, in our life, in our thoughts, that will stop us from getting into that deep, slow wave sleep. We think we've slept, and then we wake up in the morning and we feel terrible. Now, the thing about adenosine, we know it gives you this impending sense of doom, that overwhelm, that, like, the world's coming, like, crushing down on me. And we know that this is the adenosine. It's because adenosine's used as a heart medication for tachycardia. And when doctors or nurses administer this drug, they have to, like, hold the patient's hand and say, don't worry, you're not going to die. This is just the effect of adenosine. And so we wake up in the morning, and humans love to, post-rationalize and think, I feel like crap.
Yeah.
It must be my, my boss, my work, my partner, my dog.
We project out. It's the weather. It's this. It's all the other things.
Yeah. We need to land that feeling onto something. And typically it's the person next to us, or the most salient thing in our minds. But actually, you might not have just, flushed out that adenosine. And so you wake up and the world feels like a terrible place. and it's cumulative. And so that's why if anyone comes to me and says, I feel terrible, I feel wonky, I'm like, okay, first thing, how are you sleeping? What are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you eating before bed? How much are you drinking? All the things that we know are sleep
Yeah.
killers, I'll go through that list and then try and eliminate some of those things before you go and get on antidepressants, before you get divorced,
Yeah,
before you
yeah,
change.
yeah. Before you go and drug yourself up to the eyeballs, like look at,
Yeah.
and that's what I love about your work. It's like, what are the human factors in your environment or that you're doing that might be triggering or causing some of this? Let's deal with those first before we even think about this. Like, here's a tablet that's going to solve everything, right?
Yeah, and I think in manufacturing, I've been working with this big manufacturing company, and they spend millions on making sure that all of their machines, are operating, they're
Mm.
oiled, they're checked, but they don't do this with the workforce, and we don't do
No,
it with ourselves, right? You wouldn't pour a can of Coke into your, petrol tank of your
no,
Ferrari, right? But we do
no.
all these things to ourselves, and
Yeah.
then we're like get confused. Well, why aren't I feeling good? Why am I getting sick? It's there's no
Yeah.
mystery here. There's a formula. Your body needs sleep. It needs good nutrition. You need good friends. I often think that our great grandmothers would be going, "You guys are just dead set stupid. Like these are all the things we did naturally as
Really
humans."
well. The things,
And
the
now,
simple things they did really well. We've massively overcomplicated and got,
yeah. And I'm like,
distracted.
I'm getting paid to tell people just how to live like normal humans.
Yeah.
It's kind of insane, really.
It is a little, yeah, it's a little bit ironic. Let's go back on the stress thing. You talk sometimes about the positivity of stress or the positive side of stress. Unpack that for us, because I think stress is labeled as a negative, and then there's a positive that is like the opposite of it. But you see the world slightly differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's called eustress, and if you look back on your life, anything that's meaningful, anything that with a high sense of achievement or
Mm.
agency, all came with a healthy dose of stress. Like, can you think of one thing in your life that you're super proud of, and that it just came easily without any stress? No, I
Yeah,
think that endemic in that word of success and achievement is the notion that it's going to be hard.
yeah,
And so, what is bad about stress is your perception of it, the intensity, and the duration. So, I mean, they've done lots of studies, and they've asked people, I think they just studied 8,000 people, and they asked how much stress is in your life is the first
mm,
question. Then they said, how bad do you think that stress is for you? And then so in that Venn diagram, in between people who had high stress and had and thought it was bad, they were much more likely to die. It was a longitudinal study. They were like 40% more likely to die than the people who had stress in their life but didn't think it was that bad for them. So your perception of it is everything.
again,
And
it's
so,
that internal view, right? If you think it's bad, you're manifesting that it's bad. It's going to be bad.
yeah. Well, you'll produce cortisol, and cortisol will stop your sleep. Cortisol really disrupts your immune function. It
Yeah.
stops your body from scavenging up cancer cells and bacteria and viruses. So you're much more vulnerable. Your thoughts determine your immune function. Like,
You shared that with me before, and every time you say it, it freaks me out because I get
yeah,
it and it makes sense, but it's not a causation I thought of earlier on in life.
yeah.
That whatever I was thinking in here would manifest in any other way.
Well, cortisol affects your gut biome,
Yeah,
and inside your gut, you've got bacteria that produce over 85% of your serotonin, your happy
yeah.
hormones. Serotonin is also the precursor to melatonin, so they're all connected. So I'm really, really careful about secreting cortisol and what I can do to reduce it. I mean, cortisol is good when you need to run or need to act or do
Yeah.
something, but I'm really, really vociferous around, is this going to make me produce cortisol? And do I really want to have the repercussions? Do I want to have a shit sleep? Do I want to have my digestion and gut biome disrupted? Do I want to, cortisol comes off and people can smell it. Do I want to be perceived as someone who's not coping? Do I want to be perceived as someone who hasn't got their act together? No. So I'm really, really, and I think this is a really good way to talk to, those more concrete thinkers or those more, those people who think all this woo-woo hippie stuff about, emotions and mindfulness. Like, when you talk about the hormone cortisol, I think this is a really effective way to get into conversations around managing stress, mental health, self-care and all that stuff that people think might be indulgent. It's not when you talk about it.
Yeah.
The chemicals. Yeah.
Gemma,
I think
let's just explore a scenario quickly, because I know a disproportionately large amount of people, and I'm going to be honest, mainly middle-aged blokes that are in relatively high-stress situations that use exercise as the cure, right? And I don't want to suggest that that's bad. Are there any downsides to that, or are they missing something? If they're picking one solution to that problem, physiologically, what's happening there?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. And I think it's like using exercise as your panacea is probably much better than gambling or drugs or
yes, there's way worse vices out there. Yeah.
It's probably it's the better poison. But there is a scale on. I like to use this concept of an energy audit. So auditing all the things in your life, and so how much energy does this either deplete or replenish? And so we know that there's those people that get right into triathlons and they're up at 5 and they're gone all weekend, and they're actually pushing their body to the point where their immune function's quite fragile. We know that if you run for over 60 minutes at high intensity, you'll produce cortisol, which will block your testosterone. And so there's a lot of consequences of this overtraining, and it also can be like a psychological thing that you are literally running away from your problems, and
yes.
It can, yeah. And the fact that you, I know a lot of triathlon widows, women who are at home with the kids, and they're off like doing 20K bike rides before work, and they're doing all the kids stuff or dinner that they're exhausted because they've just been training some time. So you've got to look at, is this vocation depleting or replenishing you? And so I'm really big on matching your rest to your stress.
Yes.
And so there's a whole lot of different types of stress. So I'll give you the scenario. How many of you out there have gone on holiday? You've gone to an amazing resort. You've paid a lot of money. You're sitting on, beside the pool, probably scrolling through your phone. The kids are at you. You maybe your wife or your partner is sucking the bone marrow out of you. And then you get back to work and you're still absolutely cooked. And you're like, I've just spent a heap of money, a heap of time, and I'm still tired. That's because on that holiday, you still had financial stress, you still had emotional stress, you probably were scrolling, so you didn't have a sensory break. So I like to break down the type of stress: physical, emotional, financial, sensory, mental, and then you've got to work out what is the biggest driver of stress out of those things. There's many more. And then you make sure that your rest is actually hitting that stress. So going into a float tank, maybe avoiding that emotional vampire. Maybe don't have a really big, expensive holiday. Go camping. Do you know what I mean? So
reconnect with nature. Do something that positively distracts you.
Yeah, and then make sure that it really hits that particular stress that you're dealing with. And then you can come back replenished. So some stress, as I said, some stress is good. It's the way you perceive it. You need it. It's what motivates you. And but then be prepared to. I love to use the analogy of a deep sea saturation diver. So if you're in the red and you're like, you've got like, I don't know, bid proposal, you're working really hard, and you've been at it for several weeks, you need to go and find your decompression chamber. Just like a deep sea saturation diver, when they're at depth for a certain amount of hours, they know there's a formula that they have to go X amount of hours at this depth means I have to spend X amount of hours in a decompression chamber. And I think we have to see self-care in the same regard. It's a physics thing. Like if you don't do it, you're going to get nitrogen bubbles in your joints and it'll hurt. Find out how long you've been in the red, in that stress state. What is your decompression chamber? And how long do you think you need to do it for? And it's all experimentation.
But it's actually, once you find it, it's kind of logical. I was chatting with Dr. Andy Walsh the other day, right? And he was showing like when he's getting stressed and anxious, like he's picked the signals, but he's like nature. So he finds non-linear things connecting to sand, to water, to land, and even just a stroll in nature. And he's like, it completely anchors and changes his mindset relatively quickly. So now it's just a case of pick the signal earlier and that recovery. But I love the idea of like matching rest to stress, like that matching exercise is quite logical. Let's go to sleep. You've mentioned sleep a few times. You also mentioned like what are the things that we do before we sleep that kind of stop us from sleeping. What are some of the things we need to know, or some of the hacks around how we can understand sleep better?
Yeah, I think firstly, you've got to understand that it is the most important factor for mental health. The greatest performance in non-drug free performance enhancing factor that you can get your hands on. And so a good night's sleep really starts the minute you wake up. So, I think we all have heard this, get, photons in your eyeballs. So that what that does, it sets your circadian rhythm to say, okay, we need to upregulate your go-go hormones to get through the day, but it also tells your circadian rhythm exactly when to get natural sleep pressure. So 16 hours after your first photon exposure, you'll start to get this natural sleep pressure. Your adrenaline and cortisol will go down, melatonin will go up. And so if you ignore that sleep pressure, what happens is there's only, really two reasons why humans historically would be up at night outside the cave. Can you think of what those two things would be?
Well, one of them would be protection, some kind of battle, right?
Yeah, hunt or being hunted.
Yeah.
And so what do you need for those two activities? You need adrenaline and cortisol.
Yeah.
So if you're pushing past that sleep pressure at night and you've got bright eyes in your eyeballs, your brain's like, whoa, what's going on?
Right.
There must be something important. So it will start to produce cortisol and adrenaline. You get that second win. Like you're really tired around 9:30 or 10, and then like it's 11:30 and you're like, whoa, I'm wide awake. That's because your body's just like, we need to produce more chemicals to push through whatever it is. Right. And so it's harder to go to sleep. So you really need to go, okay, I've just woken up at this time. You count about 16 hours ahead. You need to be ready for bed, a pre-sleep routine for that. I know it sounds boring and there's so many other things to do, but honestly, if you can just do this one thing, is get your sleep, everything else falls in place. You have more bandwidth to eat better. You have more bandwidth to have difficult conversations, to go to the gym. Because if you're tired, all of that's overwhelming. And so it's the one thing. So make sure that you get ready. I always have like red light in my bedroom. I always don't have overhead lights. I don't have any kind of like very intense stimulus into my eyes. Don't watch violent movies. Don't have high tempo. I don't do really hard exercise. Anything that's over 50% of your maximum perceived levels, don't do in the 3 hours before bed. Okay. It increases your cortisol, increases your core body temperature. So gentle walks, yoga, all those things are best before bed. Also, what you eat before bed and what you drink is hugely predictive of how well you sleep. If you have a big heavy meal of meat in the 2 to 3 hours before bed, your body is saying, I don't want a big chunk of decomposing flesh in my intestinal structures. I need to get rid of that. So it'll do that. It'll get rid of that over deep slow wave sleep. So you wake up and you feel like crap. And it's just because you haven't cleaned out the adenosine because you're too busy digesting meat. So think alcohol, of course, is really bad. I still drink red wine, but it is very bad for sleep. Also MSG, monosodium glutamate, all those flavorings, that gives you crazy dreams, makes you thirsty. What conversations you have before bed,
the last thought you had.
Yeah. Are you going to argue with your partner before bed? Or are you going to think about, stressful things? Because there's so much really interesting research coming out now that your brain cannot differentiate between imagining something and seeing something. So they've got people in an MRI scanner, functional MRI, and they've showed them a picture of a white bear. And what you see is the occipital lobe, the visual cortex lights up. And then they ask the people to imagine that white bear. And you get similar activation in that cortex. So what it means is your brain's like, did I see it or am I thinking it?
Did that happen?
Yeah. And it's like, well, I don't know. So just in case, if you're thinking about something stressful, what is it going to do? It's like
it's going to prepare you for that eventuality.
Yeah, it's always like predicting, like what is the most dangerous and what is the cheapest thing or most expensive thing I can do. Yeah. Producing hormones is expensive, but not more expensive than getting eaten by a bear. So it will produce stress hormones just in case. It's better be safe than sorry phenomenon.
Our body still thinks we're in the savannah and everything's
Yeah.
life or death, right? We're still in the cave. Gemma, take us through. You've got an amazing set of hacks. There's an infinite number that you always talk about. What are some of the hacks that, like, you're a knowledge worker out there that they're in a high stress situation right now, maybe not getting enough sleep, juggling multiple things, economic pressure, working in distributed teams, like not always having that social connection with people. What are some of the hacks we can do just to drive that 1% improvement?
Yeah, I think it's really always important to have a confidant, have someone who's not necessarily part of your team or someone trusted. Stress shared is stress halved. I think it's
Gemma,
really
you're the third person that's told me that this week. It's fascinating. Like
yeah,
3 times with people that I would consider to be like super brains in their field have gone, you need what, like Dr. Andy Walsh, like, you need one really good friend that you can talk to about anything. And if you've
yeah.
got that, everything else is all right. You're like, it's kind of simple, but you're like, yeah, it's effective as well.
It is one of the greatest predictors of or burnout factor. So people who are more likely to burn out, they typically report that they don't have a confidant. So it is hugely beneficial to have someone. So also just having that formulaic approach to everything. So, regular sleep times, get up, move your body, eat well, but also, not really taking yourself seriously. But another good thing is like, have the hacks in the moment. Like when you're going into this meeting or you're going into something very stressful, my biggest hack is resonant breathing, through your nose, because you've got enzymes in your paranasal sinuses that produce nitric oxide, which is a sort of a vasodilator and extra calmative effect, sort of drops your heart rate. So you've got receptors on your top lip that if you start to get stressed, you should breathe through your nose. So then these receptors detect air coming through your nostrils on your lip. And so your brain goes, you're breathing through your nose. Whatever's stressing you out cannot be that serious, because if you were getting chased by a saber-toothed tiger, you would not be breathing through your nose. So that's sort of hacking into your brains, like everything's okay. So equal in and equal out. And what I suggest you do is you do resonant frequency breathing 10 minutes a day, twice a day for at least 6 weeks to get it into your unconscious competence or your muscle memory. So when you do come across a stressful situation, you don't have to think about it. It's not like, what was
it becomes automatic.
Yeah, it's just automatically just go. I do it myself now. And then also I'm doing helping me out with a research project with the British Commandos about the vagus nerve reset. So what this is when you start to feel extremely panicky and you feel like, oh my God, my brain's going, or like I'm losing control of this situation. It's like, quick whack to that vagus nerve, and what it does, it resets the frenetic messaging to your brain, and what it does, it gives you enough time to reset. It's not like Wolf of Wall Street. It's actually
you're not doing Matthew McConaughey. Yeah.
It's like a reset. And so I don't know if anyone's watching the swimming lately, or any of the Olympic athletes, like they would naturally do this, because it's a way of like resetting that stress response. And so we've got a PhD that I'm helping supervise with the British Commandos, and he's actually doing this incredible project looking at how to keep your memory online during stressful moments. And it is this formula where you breathe, resonant breathe, vagus nerve reset, and then flip your physiological signs of stress. So if you start shaking, you're like, why am I shaking? Shaking's good. It's because it's adrenaline. Adrenaline increases your speed of processing. So then looking at those stressful physiological responses and going, no, actually, that's a great thing. That's actually going to make me faster, smarter, higher speed.
More alert. I'm in the moment. This is great. Yeah.
So that's my 3-point strategy. Vagus nerve reset, resonant breathing, and flipping the stress into something advantageous.
Have you got one for travel? Like, not necessarily jet lag, but like there's a lot of leaders I know that travel around, and for me, travel's a killer. Like it takes everything down a few notches.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So definitely, if you can, try to assimilate your timing, sort of push your times to more towards the times where you're landing. When you're on the plane, avoid like heavy proteins and try and avoid alcohol. Of course, hydrate. But also, if you do have to land and you need to go to a meeting, but you're actually exhausted and want to go to sleep, the best thing you can do is get in the shower, wash yourself, and then turn your tap to cold. So we've just finished this massive study with Wim Hof, with
Yeah.
like over 400 participants. And we've got this incredible data showing that cold does increase your mental clarity by 33%.
Wow.
So I would definitely, if you can, this is also good for hangovers. If you are sleep deprived, you're jet lagged, get cold, at least for 2 minutes. If you can't get in a cold shower, I would suggest dipping your face in some cold water, because you've got a higher concentration of thermoregulating receptors on your face. Before you go into the meeting, if you can, get your phone over the back there, color in a sticky tape with a blue pen, and then you just go like this when you're about to go into your meeting, like that, and then put some blue light into your eyeballs before the meeting, and that will like sort of activate your circadian rhythm. Also, if you still feel terrible, cardio is fantastic.
Yeah.
Definitely go for a run.
Yeah. Love that.
So they're
Yeah,
my
they're all great hacks. Jemma, I've taken a whole lot of notes. I got distracted taking notes. I was meant to be asking questions, but I've taken it. I watched this back when our audience indulges with it as well. Thank you so much for your time, for your advice. Where can people follow up? I'm sure people are going to have like a million things that they want to track of yours. How do they best reach out or learn about the wonderful world of Dr. Jemma King?
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best thing. I don't really pay much attention to my website, but I'm always posting all of my research and
you share a lot, and I really appreciate that, because I know there's a ridiculous amount of work that goes into that. So if anyone is interested in the research, Jemma is a regular poster of the findings, and also and here's what this means, which I think is missing from a lot of the narrative. So we really appreciate that. In exchange for your time and your generosity today, we're donating $500 to a charity of your choice. Can you talk us through the charity you've chosen and why, please?
Yeah, so it's the 079 Foundation. So this is a volunteer organisation driven by Special Forces commandos out of 2 Commando Regiment in Holsworthy. The reason being, my business partner, Matt, is a commando, and he was blown up in Helmand Province in Afghanistan by a Russian anti-tank mine, and was very badly injured. And then so he started the Human Performance Wing at 2 Commando to try and help integrate those injured warriors and back into so they're operational, but also it was an institution to try and improve the performance of those who are healthy and serving. And so this foundation is actually by commandos, for commandos, only like beret qualified commandos. And so I just think that, to give back to them, they were incredibly generous in letting me come into this world, do years of research and years of consulting into this organisation. And they, honestly, that sort of kick-started my career. And from then, Swimming Australia came and to work with me. And then from then the AIS, and then, they...
It's full circle, right? You get to pay it back, but also like acknowledge those that do heroic things on our behalf to protect us. And it doesn't always go well for them. So I really
protected identity, and so they can't talk about what they do, and so often they are overlooked because they are secret and people don't know what they're doing. I know what they need, and they don't really ask for help. So I think this is a really important foundation for the guys that are doing the hard stuff that help us sleep safely in our beds at night. So.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's an appreciation for your time. So thank you anyway, Jemma, for your time. I know you're busy being courted by 1,000,001 people to share your insights and wisdom. $500 from us will go to them. So thank you so much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, that is all we've got from the wonderful Dr. Jemma King. You can follow Jemma on her website or on LinkedIn for more information. We'll also put those links in our show notes. Jemma, thank you so much for your time and joining Experts on Launch.